Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, experts in general have got a bad rap in the last 18 months. None more so than economists who've actually had a bad decade. What with that crash that wasn't foreseen. And now the knife is well and truly stuck into the profession in a new book written by three young economists from the University of Manchester, who are proposing the subject opens its mind and extends its range of thinking. But also the authors propose that it is altogether too important a subject to be left to economists. Let me read you a little quote. Politics is increasingly framed in terms of economics in a way that excludes the public and damages democratic culture and process. Trying to make democracy more meaningful will clearly necessitate democratising economics. Well, they call the economic elite the Econocracy, and they want a citizens' economics, and we have one of the authors here, Joe Earle, and an economist of a more traditional kind, Diane Coyle, Professor of Economics at the University of Manchester. Evening to you both. So, Joe, just tell us the basic thrust of the critique in the book in a few sentences.
It's the story of an international student movement called Rethinking Economics, and we've got 53 groups in 22 countries across the world, and it's essentially about us all independently coming to university, wanting to understand the world and influencing it, and arriving and feeling that our economics education wasn't preparing us to do that, that it wasn't fit for purpose. And then at the same time to have all of our friends and families asking us, oh, what's going on in the financial crisis and the Eurozone's falling apart, and not feeling embarrassed.
You didn't have anything to say about it.
Exactly.
Diane Coyle, what do you agree with in this book?
Well, I agree with quite a lot of it. The headline that you gave was taking the economists out of economics, which is obviously nonsense, and you wouldn't take the chemists out of chemistry or the genetic scientists out of genetics. But putting people into economics, I think, is very important, and I do agree with that.
Yeah.
And part of the problem has been that most economists don't do the stuff that's about financial crises and austerity and so on. Most of us do much more small-scale economics that's very different in character, and it's not
too mathematical, perhaps too mathematical?
It's not particularly mathematical even. It's very numerical. It's very much looking at empirical evidence about how markets work or how people make decisions.
What do you disagree with in the critique? And Manchester students have been quite vociferous in this critique, and you teach there. But what do you disagree with?
The one bit I disagree with is the idea that all of economics is political, and I think it's a mixture. I think some of it is inherently political, and you have to acknowledge that, and perhaps economists in the past have not been open enough about that. But some of it is very much not. It's much more scientific. You can't have a Marxist theory of how students might respond to certain incentives to go into education or not. There's politics involved in it, but there's also science and numbers involved in it too.
So explain the point, because you do think it's all basically politics hidden away in technical models.
It's not about narrow left and right wing politics. So we, for example, we think Hayek and Marx would both join Rethinking Economics if they're alive today. It's about being taught a particular way of thinking. And so, for example, in the response Diane just gave, she was talking about Marxist economics, but then also talking about incentives. And that's a particular way of looking at the world. And that has a particular view of human nature in that, and a particular view about markets and them being the right way of organising things. But then also not,
But Diane didn't say markets are the right way of organising things.
But the assumption is that most of what we look at is markets, and again, this isn't about narrow left and right wing politics, because lots of economists today believe that markets don't work and they need to be regulated better.
But I think economists better than anyone understand.
But it's not studying. It's not studying institutions, for example.
Oh, I disagree. Economics studies institutions a lot. It's about collective decision-making about the use of resources and allocation of resources. And markets are part of that, but other institutions...
Yeah, but in the graduate courses they don't do... In the undergrad courses they don't do much of that, do they? I mean, you have to get to the sort of advanced levels before you start on that kind of thing, don't you?
Well, in mind they certainly do. And I think the curriculum's been changing a lot over the past few years. partly thanks to people like Joe.
I think it's very important to note that Diane is an exception, and we really respect her because she always comes to debate with us, and she always, and her course at Manchester is a very exception.
Okay.
And I think
Joe,
people would be really shocked by the state of economics education.
Just tell me,
today.
is there a danger? Did you agree with Michael Gove when he said we've had enough of experts? Because there's quite a bit of that Gove critique there. Yeah.
No, we are the next generation of economists, and we believe.
But isn't Gove just saying exactly the same thing as you?
Not at all. No, we believe that experts need to change so that they are trusted again and so that they are listened to. Because Brexit very clearly showed that people did not trust kind of economic models and predictions.
But you don't want them to trust the economic models and predictions.
Because we want economists to not just to communicate better, which is what we're doing ourselves. So, you know, we have a website called economy.org, which is all about communicating economics in an accessible way, but also not just to then assume that people will then agree, but to recognise maybe that our way of thinking about the economy doesn't represent the lived experience of people in the country.
Diane, do you accept the criticism of economics that it did become too close-minded and it didn't have a broad enough range of models, left-wing models, right-wing models, whatever you want? It just somehow...
I think it became too close-minded a very long time ago. And the high water mark of that kind of economics for me was in the mid-1980s and late 1980s. Things like behavioural economics, understanding the psychology of how people take decisions, using new methods like randomised control trials, experimental methods, that's been happening for about 20 years now. And I think the big failing, and we let down students, was that it took too long to change the curriculum, to introduce that.
To bring
and so Joe's quite right to say that when the crisis happened, undergraduate courses weren't equipping people to talk to their family.
Joe, it's true, isn't it? I mean, you can go to any technical area, the people who set the traffic lights, you know, for pedestrians versus cars. These are all, there are political decisions built into everything in society.
Of course, but I think there was a very big difference with economics. Economics it's about our lives, it's about who does what, who gets what. And, you know, these values are really important, and we're just asking for people for economists to go out and to listen and to get involved, Joe, and to really get their shoes dirty.
Joe, Diane, thanks both very much indeed.